The neck blank's all glued up, so it's been sat for almost exactly 24 hours drying, so I'm going to take the clamps off now. We'll see about getting it neck shaped. So I need to run this through the table saw just to clean up and square this face and this face, and then we can have a proper look at what we've got. The neck blank's been planed up, so I need to get a centre line on here. Obviously I've got quite a nice marker with the veneers, so I can just measure between them. So we're using a 6-a-side headstock on this, so I normally leave 7.5 to 8 inches of spare to play with, which that looks about bang on there. I'll make sure we've got a nice straight line across. So the neck is going to join the body at the 20th fret, which means I need to use the crimson scale ruler to figure out where that is from the nut position I've marked. I'm also going to mark where the 24th fret is, because that's the end of my fretboard. And then I need to mark the width of a pickup, because the neck join is going to end inside the pickup cavity, and that's where I'll cut it off. And I'm using filtertrons on this, which are approximately 1.25 inches across. So if I give myself 1.5 inches, that gives me a bit of extra to play with. Okay, so that's all the marks on the top, except for one, which is the width of the nut. So I want my angle to start behind the nut, so I mark that on. So now we have to transfer all of those marks onto the side, so we can mark out a profile. So if I mark the angle of the headstock, roughly, just estimate it for now, and we can use the protractor to see where we're at, and that is looking like just under 12 degrees, which isn't too bad. And essentially I mark 15mm from the maximum depth of the piece of wood and then see where it leaves me. I tend to go between 10 and 12 degrees because it's steep enough that I don't need string trees, but it's not so steep that it puts unnecessary pressure on the neck joint and the headstock break angle. And it seems to work because everything I've built with that angle so far has great tuning stability and fantastic amounts of sustain. So I'm going to stick with it. So we'll keep that there. So we've marked the thickness of the neck slightly over, mark it at 3/4 of an inch all the way down. That gives me plenty to play with for tapering. And I like to have a little bit thicker on the join. I also like to have a volute on the, or volute, however you say it, under the nut, or behind the nut, just to add a little bit of extra strength where I've taken away some material for the truss rod. Not very large, usually starting just in front of the nut and then coming back up onto the headstock a little bit. Just leave myself enough there. That is nicely marked up, and in theory that would actually also leave me with enough of this neck blank left for a second neck with probably a straight Fender style headstock at some point in the future, or I could do a scarf joint and have an angled headstock as well. So whilst we've got everything nice and square, the next job is to route the truss rod channel and any carbon fibre that's going in. So in this one I've got my truss rod here. I've also got these carbon fibre rods. They're not solid. These ones I'm experimenting with a hollow square rod. So it's got a round hole running all the way through it, which was kind of an interesting little experiment to see whether it makes any difference. Strength wise, there's not much difference between this and a solid bar. Weight wise, obviously this is very slightly lighter. It's kind of negligible. I just thought it'd be interesting to see if having a small hollow running all the way up the neck would make any difference. That's the truss rod slot. Now I just need to measure up and route for the carbon fibre. which is a little bit easier, and just run the fence along this edge of the neck. We've already got a slight taper to it, so it'll just follow along. I've just cut this on the bandsaw. The camera was set up, but then all of a sudden went completely out of focus and doesn't show anything. So you don't get to see that. But it's roughly cut now. I just need to plane it to finalise the angle. So I've got the number 4 out. We'll start with this and see how it goes. I've taken the oversized neck blank to the bandsaw and I've cut it roughly down to size. My bandsaw's still not really playing. I need to take some time to strip it down and properly set it up, give it a really good clean and things. So the cut's not perfect, but I've left enough extra there just to account for that. This is the only part, the join, that I need to get perfectly parallel, but I'm going to thickness this down using the router sled, get it at least close. So I've got my perfectly flat face here, which I've given another quick go over with a levelling beam and some sandpaper just to make sure it's nice and perfect. And so we're going to attach it down, and then we'll level it all off. Now, as you can see, I've flattened off this area here. I've taken the neck area itself slightly deeper, so I've gone to 3/4 of an inch here, or just over, which is the maximum thickness that we'd have on a particularly chunky neck. The heel where the join will be is an inch thick. That's the full amount, the full depth of this will be recessed into the glue joint. The only thing proud will be the fretboard. So there's plenty there. Next job, I believe, is to taper the sides of the neck and get it ready for a fretboard. I'm loving this grain. To cut the taper on the neck, normally I'd use the bandsaw to run just outside the line and then clean it up with either planes or even a straight edge and a router. At the moment, because my bandsaw needs a lot of work, I'm going to have to figure out an alternative way to do this. A way that I've done in the past is to use the table saw. Similar to quite a lot of the jigs that I've used, I use a nice flat board with two very straight parallel edges, and if I attach this face down in just the right place and run this edge along the fence, as long as I stop at the right point, the blade will just leave me a nice straight cut along whatever distance I set this at. So if I attach this down and then set up the table saw, I can do one face, and then I'll flip the fence to the opposite side of the blade so I'm still cutting in the same direction, and I'll do this side, and then we'll have a tapered neck. So I need to stick it down. There we go, we now have a nicely tapered neck. What I'm probably going to do next is clean up these areas where the transition from the nut into the headstock is with, I use the bandsaw and the spindle sander, and then we're on to finalising some shapes.